my 100th day of sobriety, I just completely lost it, and I made the decision I was gonna get hit by a train. I was gonna kill myself. So I wrote out all my letters to people. I wrote out a will for all my stuff, and I went and I sat by the train tracks. And it was a Monday morning, early in the morning, like 8 a.m. And I don't know if you know the town that I live in, but on Monday mornings, trains are just constantly running through. And I was sitting there for about 45 minutes. No train came by. And I was just praying. And I said, if this is really demons, if I'm not just crazy, then, maybe God is real too. And God, if that's the case, I know that you don't like it when people kill themselves, but I'm doing this to protect other people, because I don't want to hurt people. So this is more of like a virtuous act in my mind at the time. And I just said, Lord, if this isn't what you want for me, you have to send me something right now so that this doesn't happen. And right after I was finished praying that, some guy was walking home from the gas station with a case of beer. And for the first time in 100 days, I had a desire to drink again. Just a little bit. And I just thought to myself, I want to drink a little bit more than I want to die. So I like to say that God used alcoholism to save my life, which sounds kind of kooky, but I think it's kind of cool. So I grew up in the Christian church. My parents, took me and my siblings to church every week. We believed in the Bible and all that, but pretty much as soon as I was old enough to kind of start making my own decisions, I came to the realization that I didn't really believe. And I actually hid that from my family for a good few years because, nobody who's grown up in the Christian church wants to not believe when they start reaching the age of like 12 or 13. But if it happens, it just kind of happens. I kind of looked at it like I couldn't really force myself to believe in something that I didn't believe in. But, by the time I was 12 or 13, I was watching porn all the time. By the time I was 14, I knew I was bisexual, and I became a kleptomaniac. I was stealing all the time from, like, gas stations and stuff. And I always kind of kept the moral high ground in my own mind by not stealing from people directly, but instead just stealing from, like, businesses and bigger businesses, not, like, small family businesses. But, by the time I was 15, I was drinking a decent amount. Not all the time, but socially. When I was 16, I started smoking cigarettes. I ended up coming out as transgender, so I started identifying as a man. And, things just kind of spiraled out of control after that. I started smoking weed when I was 17. Started doing a lot of psychedelics. I stopped that around 18 because I had a really bad experience. But I was a complete stoner from that point on. I was smoking weed all the time. Wake up in the morning, get high, stay high, all day, every day. And I, for a long time, was dealing with a lot of demonic forces at play in my life. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that quite literally, in my own mind, I was dealing with what I considered to be demonic entities. And for years, I couldn't really talk to anyone about it. And, there were times where I'd literally try to, and the words just wouldn't come out. And I was always stuck between believing that it was real and believing that I was going crazy. And it was like I couldn't decide which one I wanted to be true because both of them were really awful realities. So I just didn't make a choice, and I just kept it to myself, and it tormented me for years. And by the time I was 19, I was doing a lot of pills and drinking a lot, and when I quit doing pills, I just started drinking all the time, super hardcore. So I became an alcoholic that spiraled out of control really quickly. My breakfast was 5 shots of vodka within half an hour of waking up, and it tasted like water in the morning. I didn't even taste it. I was drinking a bottle a day. I ended up... I don't think I ever told my family about this, but I called my dad one night, and I told him that I needed to go to rehab. But right before that, I had just prayed to God and just begged for relief. And then immediately after that, I made the decision that I needed to go to rehab. So I was there for a couple of weeks. I didn't stay for the full month that I was supposed to. But about a week and a half into this, and I never told any of my family about this, so here it is. But I was still dealing with these demonic forces, and I basically made a deal with this entity that if it would take away all of my desire for liquor and I would never drink again, that was it. My soul was theirs. So I literally made a deal with the devil. And I had no desire for liquor after that. So I left early because I knew I wasn't going to drink. I just didn't desire it whatsoever. And I didn't drink. And for 100 days, I had no desire to drink, even though my life was spiraling out of control more and more and more. At this point, I was a weed dealer for months and months. How I was paying my bills, my rent, all that. And, I kept trying to convince myself, now that you're not drinking, everything's okay. Because, you're not drinking. But all of these things in my head were just getting worse and worse. And I started having really dark thoughts that I didn't want to have, that were basically being forced on me by these forces. And one of the main ones that really bothered me was thoughts of me hurting other people. And I'm not an aggressive person. I don't like hurting other people. So, eventually, my 100th day of sobriety, I just completely lost it, and I made the decision I was gonna get hit by a train. I was gonna kill myself. So I wrote out all my letters to people. I wrote out a will for all my stuff, and I went and I sat by the train tracks. And it was a Monday morning, early in the morning, like 8 a.m. And I don't know if you know the town that I live in, but on Monday mornings, trains are just constantly running through. And I was sitting there for about 45 minutes. No train came by. And I was just praying. And I said, if this is really demons, if I'm not just crazy, then, maybe God is real too. And God, if that's the case, I know that you don't like it when people kill themselves, but I'm doing this to protect other people, because I don't want to hurt people. So this is more of like a virtuous act in my mind at the time. And I just said, Lord, if this isn't what you want for me, you have to send me something right now so that this doesn't happen. And right after I was finished praying that, some guy was walking home from the gas station with a case of beer. And for the first time in 100 days, I had a desire to drink again. just a little bit, and I just thought to myself, you know, I want to drink a little bit more than I want to die. So I like to say that God used alcoholism to save my life, which sounds kind of kooky, but I think it's kind of cool. So I drank that day instead of getting hit by a train, luckily. I drank for about a week after that. Exactly a week, I think, yeah. My prayer had always been, as soon as I stopped believing, my prayer was always, God, give me proof so I can believe. I changed that to just, God, give me faith and do your will. Just do what you need to do. And after a week of drinking again, I had a dream. And, you know, a lot of people might say, oh, you had a dream, and that was it. You just had a dream. But this was different than a normal dream. It started out where I was being tormented in this house and going through all of these perverse, awful things and being forced to enjoy it by this force that I couldn't really see or anything. But, I mean, I remember the details of it. I won't go into detail on this beginning part because it was really dark and messed up, and I was being forced to enjoy it. It was messed up. And it's like I would come to my senses and start to run away. But then I'd get caught from behind by this force, and it would start all over again. And I wouldn't remember that it had happened already. And then when I came to my senses again, I'd remember all of the previous times that it had already happened. So every time that I came to my senses, I managed to get a little bit farther away. I remembered all of the previous times. So eventually, I'm running away, and I managed to get outside of this house. I'm running down the street, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not getting caught right away. I can just outrun this. I just have to keep running. And there was a big hole in the ground. Well, not huge, like manhole size. And I fall into this hole. It starts over again. So the next time I came to my senses, I'm running, and I jump over this hole. And I ran in a linear path all the way around the world and fell back into this hole. And I've kind of interpreted that as like, you can't run away from this on your own. You can't just run away from this problem. Which is what I had always been good at doing in the past with my problems, just trying to run away from them and not deal with them. So then all of a sudden, I'm in a giant field filled with people who are all running together, and I'm having to run with them because we're all packed in and there's nowhere else to go, and it's just like a stampede of people, and everyone is just incredibly excited. And they're all saying, you know, come on, this is great, like, this is awesome, let's go, and they're all just whipping each other into this excited frenzy. And at the last minute, I realized that everyone, including myself, is running towards the sheer edge of a cliff and throwing themselves off of it into this chasm that just has no bottom. It's just blackness. And everyone's excited, and there was nowhere else to go, so I had to jump too. So then I jump, and I'm falling in like really slow motion. So I can kind of look around and see what's going on as I'm falling. And off to the side, there's a lower part of this cliff, and on it is a raft, and there's this smaller group of people just standing around this raft watching all of this happen. I knew that I had to land in the raft, or else I'd just fall into this pit below. I was heading in completely the wrong direction to land in this raft. And so I thought to myself, oh no, like, I'm never gonna make it, I'm gonna fall and die. And then I just thought to myself, no, I have to make it, that's the only option. And a force turned me in midair and pushed me from behind. So then I'm falling I know that I'm gonna land in this raft. So I'm super excited. This smaller group of people who are standing around this raft are super excited. They're all cheering me on. By the time I actually landed in the raft, I remember actually being angry with a small group of people that are still just standing there cheering for me and all this. And I just said, why are you so excited about just me? Hundreds of thousands of people are throwing themselves to their death right behind us. Like, why are you so excited? This is awful. So behind this group of people in this raft, there's this giant skyscraper. And this is the most intense part of the dream. All of a sudden, I'm like out of my body, just floating through the air, looking at the top floor of the skyscraper from the outside of the building. And there's a giant hole in the wall, almost like the Chicago sky deck, without any of the glass. It's a giant square hole in the wall. And there's this being that's standing there right at the edge. And from the neck down, like a really fit guy in like a business suit, like a really fancy, nice looking business suit. From the neck up, the best way I can describe him is huge black orb eyes and baseball-sized masses all over his face, just completely disfiguring him. And he said, I know that my form must be scary to you, don't be afraid. It was kind of just like, just don't be afraid. It wasn't all that comforting. So then all of a sudden I was back down on the ground in front of this tower. And I knew I had to get up there and talk to him. I didn't really know why, but I knew that I had to. So I start making my way up through the levels of this tower, and there are these people in there, and my first guttural reaction is to just attack them. They all had like machetes and swords and weapons, so instead I was just running past them to get up through the layers of this tower, and every time that I would ignore one and just run past it, these people would just start laughing and cackling at me as I went. So I finally made it up to the top floor where this being was, and it was super scary because it was very vivid and realistic. There was wind like gushing in through the hole in this wall, blowing everything all over the place. We were super high up, so I'm like hanging on to the wall because I'm afraid of heights too. And this entity was just super arrogant and cocky. And the first thing he said, he just starts off, he just goes, it doesn't matter what you do, even if you were to throw me from the hole in this wall and I were to hit the ground, I wouldn't die. Because in this realm, this suit jacket makes me immortal here. And I just said, well, what if you didn't have that? And he looked kind of unhappy to be answering the question, but I got the feeling that he had to tell me the truth for some reason about anything that I asked him. And he said, well, yeah, then if I got pushed out of this hole, I'd probably die. All of a sudden, no time passed, it was just, the jacket was in my hand. And he just kind of like backed up in surprise and like shock. And I threw it out the hole, so it just blew away in the wind. And I said to him, now that we're on more even footing here, tell me who you are and why you're doing this to me, because at that point, it was somehow just kind of made pretty clear to me that all of the torment from the first part of this dream was caused by this being. And he said, I'm a minion of my God, which I interpret to mean the devil, so I think this was a demon. He said, I'm a minion of my God, sent by the Lord. The Lord and I have a wager on whether or not your longing is more for him or for the wickedness of the world. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you know? And I immediately just rushed and grabbed him and went to throw him out of this hole. And as soon as I touched him, I couldn't gaze on him anymore. I could tell that his form was changing, and I think it was kind of him assuming more of his true form, and I couldn't look at him directly. I knew that he was getting much smaller, like, as I went to throw him out of this hole, and by the time I actually got there, I could tell, even though I couldn't really look at him, that he was tiny. He was growing roots onto my hand to not fall. So I had to shake my hand super hard, and he fell out this hole. And then, after that, I ran home, and I was running down this pathway outside, and coming in the opposite direction was just a completely black, downtrodden, sad-looking figure on a bike. And I didn't have a car for quite a few months. I was just riding a bike around everywhere. So I've kind of interpreted this as, like, my sin and suffering, but I just ran straight past it. But then when I looked behind me, this bike was just on the ground with nothing else there. So I've kind of seen that as, like, all of that just being washed away. And I woke up from this dream, and I just immediately was a believer. I mean, it was undeniable to me that this wasn't just a normal dream. It didn't feel like a normal dream. It wasn't like any sort of normal dream I had ever had before. And I've had plenty of wild dreams. Nothing like any other dream I've ever had. So, immediately, I was just on board, you know? I just believed from that point on. And a few days later, I had a second dream. And this dream was probably actually scarier than the first one. And again, it was sort of demons tormenting me. The first half of this dream was very odd, because it was like I kept waking up and falling back asleep, and waking up and falling back asleep, to the point where I couldn't tell if I was actually waking up or if I was dreaming, because it was all set within my apartment. So I couldn't tell if I was awake or asleep. And I remember I kept trying to get my window so I could look outside. It was like one of those, you can't really move, like you're straining as hard as you can, but you can't move. And I don't know why, but it was just terrifying. And then it started to sort of morph into, I wasn't really in my apartment anymore, but I still couldn't tell if I was awake or asleep, and there were these demons around me, you know, tormenting me, forcing me to partake in these perverse, messed up things and acts and stuff. And then eventually at one point, they told me, they basically just said, yeah, you're dreaming, we're demons, and we're torturing you. And they said it to sort of console me and make me complicit in what was happening, and for a little while it actually worked, because I was just so relieved that it was just a dream and that I'd wake up in the morning and it wouldn't be reality. And I mean, just super messed up stuff. It started out a little bit lighter, and then as time went on, it just got darker and darker and darker. And at one point, they were all surrounding me, talking about how they were going to sow doubt in me by trying to convince me that I was just schizophrenic. And I remember I had one moment of doubt in the dream where I just thought to myself, what if I am just going crazy? And they all just started freaking out, laughing and cackling and sneering at me and going, that's the point. But then eventually I came to the point where I was like, it doesn't matter that this is just a dream. This is super messed up. It has to stop. And they gave me a choice. And it was between where I wanted to go. And the first choice, I could see their lips moving, I could hear, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. So the first option was just kind of shrouded in mystery. And the second option was visiting some kids selling candy. And I think they were expecting me to choose the second option just to get away from the torment for a while. But I said, no, I need to figure out what's going on here. I'm going with the first option. So he led me to this podium, and there was just this tiny guy standing behind this podium, and the first thing that came out of my mouth without even really thinking about it is I just said, "I know that you're the gatekeeper." And he just looked kind of shocked. All of these other demons started getting really excited and started saying, "Say it again, say it again." And I said, "No, I'm not going to say it again. The point wasn't to make you happy." And then all of a sudden, I was in a warehouse with this one female demon, and it was because I wouldn't say this again. It went from really messed up and dark and perverted to straight up about to be physical torture because she was going to start ripping my teeth out. So I started freaking out, like punched her in the face. I started running away. I knew that she was way faster and stronger than I was. But right before she got her hands on me again, I just turned around to face her, and in my dream just started saying, "In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, like, get away from me, get out of me." She started like cowering and backing away in fear, and all of a sudden, it was the most beautiful thing. This white shimmering light filled this whole warehouse we were in. The whole room started shaking like an earthquake, and this beautiful chorus of hallelujahs just started filling the whole room. And I said it a few times in a row. Then like all of this was happening, and I was just in awe. So I stopped, and I was just like looking and listening to all of this going on. And this demon was like across the room from me at that point. As soon as I stopped, she got this wicked like smile on her face, and she just said, "It doesn't matter, you're dead," and just started sprinting right at me. And I just stood there, and I said, "No, I'm not dead, I'm alive." And in my dream, I just started like rising up off the ground, and then I woke up. And this was the craziest thing ever, because my normal reaction to this would not be to fall right back asleep again. Immediately, it was like I was getting sucked back down into sleep, so I just started fervently praying, like, for these entities to get away from me and for protection from God. And it took about 5 full minutes of, like, hardcore prayer for me to even be able to physically sit up. Like, I was about to pass out again, completely against my will. It was crazy. But I haven't had any sort of demonic issues or anything after that, because I just, I was praying these demons out of me and for protection, and I haven't had a single issue since then, which is definitely another cause for me to truly believe that it was never schizophrenia or anything like that, because I haven't had a single symptom of it since then whatsoever. So then, aside from my dreams, and that's how I came to believe, too, as soon as I woke up from my first dream, I knew that I wanted to do evangelism in ministry. I felt really called. That was my purpose. But I quickly started praying about being transgender once I started to believe, because I didn't really know how to be both of those at once, transgender and a Christian. And I got the feeling when I first started praying about it from God that, that I just needed to leave it alone for a while and not worry about it. So I left it alone for a few days, and then I went back to praying about it because I couldn't let it go. And I just felt called to just that thing where you open your Bible to a random page and point at a random verse without looking. And I got 1 Corinthians 7:19 and 20, which, I'll paraphrase, is pretty much, circumcision or uncircumcision means nothing. Following the Lord's commandments is what counts. Each person should remain as they were when they came to the Lord. So I just said, okay, I'll leave it alone for now. I'll just give it a back seat. But I prayed, and I just said, as soon as you lay it on my heart that this is a sin and this is wrong, I will detransition, even if I'm miserable from that point on. But a few weeks later, I was just hanging out in my apartment, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it just hit me that it's not about sin as much as it is about suffering. Some things are suffering because they're a sin. I think that other things are a sin because they are suffering. And I think that that's what transgenderism is more about. Because to be transgender, by definition, you have to be suffering. You don't like your own body, you don't feel comfortable as you are, you hate yourself, essentially. And I just said, it's not even about the sin as much, it's about the suffering, and suffering as much as sin is from the devil, and God doesn't want me to suffer forever. And I just said, Lord, take my suffering, and I physically felt it come out of me, and I'm just not transgender anymore. That didn't come from a church, that didn't come from other people, that didn't even come from me. That is just undeniable. I haven't had a single moment of doubt since then whatsoever about the fact that I'm a female, and I'm happy with that, and I'm okay with that. So, I've been in the process of detransitioning. Yeah, just my entire life has been completely altered. I haven't drank since the day before I had that first dream. I'm not a dealer anymore. I don't smoke weed anymore. I don't steal anymore. I don't lie to people anymore. I'm just so much happier with Jesus, and it's just incredible. And for the first time, pretty much in my entire young adult life, I'm actually excited for the future and what God has in store.